If there was one simple change that you could make that would supercharge your cycling performance, would you try it? Well, unfortunately there is, and I hate cycling for this, but right now it seems there really aren't any alternatives to structured training. If you're not doing it, you need to start taking advantage of it. Today, I'm going to share my structured training planning process that has helped the cyclists I've coached over the past 12 years reach the top of their sport or achieve their personal goals. But here's a warning. It goes against most of the common cycling training advice that you've heard. Even if you've never done structured training before, this process could be the game changer for your performance. First, let's clarify what I mean when I say structured training and how it can transform your performance. Is it just about making a plan and writing the workouts? Well, not exactly. So let me give you a quick science lesson on how your body works. Imagine your year looks like this. And every ride you do gets a score. The higher the score, the more potential there is for fitness gains. And then consistency is the key. So then if you're riding, you take a rest, riding, take a rest, take a rest. This all compounds so that your fitness builds over time. So just keep doing this and your fitness will build over time. But how do you do this? Well, the score is based on different metrics, and if you accumulate a lot of training stress, it indicates that you're pushing your body enough to stimulate adaptations. So you'll score higher over time. And then if you manage your recovery well through proper hydration, nutrition, sleep, and rest, then you'll have more energy to earn even more points. But why do I hate this? It sounds like an amazing strategy, right? Well, it's because our understanding of how we respond to stress has evolved, but the way that we plan training hasn't. Traditionally, coaches have structured training by choosing a periodization model and an intensity distribution model and building from there. And these methods are often tradition-driven rather than evidence-based. And there are significant gaps in every periodization theory. Some people are asking the right questions about new approaches, but here's what frustrates me. We don't have a practical alternative to periodization yet. So as much as I hate it, I continue to use structured training, filling in the large scientific gaps by making adjustments where I can and leveraging its strengths, which are helping provide some progress and structure to workouts, as well as aiding in the mental aspect of training. But here's the trap. You can't just follow a plan and expect results. The real key is having a structured training process full of checks and balances to ensure you're on track and your training is working. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a minute, but before we dive into that process, let me answer the question. Does this mean all cyclists should do structured training? My answer is not necessarily. You need to understand the system to decide for yourself though. But I do believe my approach applies to more cyclists than a traditional training plan. So let me explain. First, stop thinking about it as a training plan. Think of it more like a training strategy. Remember, structured training doesn't automatically mean good. And this is where we get ATS, annual training strategy, rather than ATP, annual training plan. Second, your strategy needs to be flexible, which is challenging. You basically do this by researching science, but to save you the effort, I've done the homework over the years and have a few ideas that have worked out for me. And you can tweak this strategy to fit your own cycling and create your own version. For example, you can apply this to any type of cycling. Everyone is different, so we all need different training strategies. And in case you are wondering, this training strategy is based on solid evidence, but not just on data that you can measure. It's important to know that what works for us might not work for others and the other way around, so training should fit each person. What works in theory might not always work in real life. Now, let me show you how I develop a training strategy using a new cyclist who just started with semi-pro coaching this week. So let's get to step one. And it might sound cliche, but knowing why you ride and what your goals are is crucial. Picture your number one cycling goal right now. Got it? This goal sets the general direction, because here's something no one talks about when it comes to goals. Winners and losers have the same goals. Let that sink in. If successful and unsuccessful cyclists have the same goals, the goal isn't what makes you successful. It's the process. And in this case, it's the strategy. For your goal, simply state what you want to achieve. For example, I want to top 10 in the Filthy 150. It gives you a result and an event, and performance goals can come later. Put that goal down into an event calendar first. And there might be other events that you want to add. So the classic ABC ranking from Joe Friel is really useful here. So see this table when deciding. Now, step 2. And then this next one, some people ignore and others don't, but I think it's actually pretty important. A few years ago, I got a glimpse into the training of one of the world's top cycling teams, and I noticed a pattern. Everything they do is simple. For example, here's how one workout was written. There's no need to overcomplicate training. Let's map this out so we are basically segmenting an entire year, starting with 3 overreaching periods. So if we have our complete year here, this is a year, and the start and end can be anywhere. Now, if we want to divide this into 3, we're kind of looking at half and then half again. The first one here is prep, and then comp, and then transition. Right, then we can divide these up again. Now here is going to be where we get into general prep, and then specific prep, and then we have pre-comp, comp, and then transition again. Now we get to the final segments, and these are really the ones that you will see moving from month to month. So we have base 1, 2, 3. We have build 1, 2. We have peak, perform, and then transition. Preparation, the objective is to gently return to normal training volumes at reduced intensity. Base, the objective is to build fitness with a tolerable yet challenging training load. And then we move to build, and the objective is to consolidate basic fitness and to maximize race-specific fitness. Pre-comp and competition, so peak and perform, the objective here is to freshen up for your best race result. Transition then, the objective is just to shed fatigue so you can do the whole thing again. And the names used are the progression from general to specific training, and it doesn't really matter what names are used here, but I found that a 5 to 7 month training cycle is ideal. If you're new to structured training, stick to seasons of 3 to 4 months before having a longer rest. Elite athletes are best served with seasons of about 5 to 7 months. Now, step 3. This step is one of the most crucial, and getting it wrong could impact your entire year, but getting it right will give you a competitive edge, and it's managing training load progression. I start with the numbers, and we'll talk about them in a second, and then I adjust that based on feedback from the rider and what the numbers are telling me. So just remember, the goal is finding out how much load you can handle without going over the edge. And you can use prior training history for this, or have a look for signs of recovery and performance along the way. But your peak is a component of your starting load and how quickly you can add fitness without burning out. And I've discussed this a lot. So the key takeaway here is to keep pushing. Never let your training stagnate. Now, I follow some guidelines to get set up and adjust from there. So let's have a look at this actual annual training strategy that I've put together. Remember the stress score from the start of the video? I use a measure called training stress score from Training Peaks. Again, it's not perfect, but I use it, and I'll map out a weekly TSS estimate where we might end up during the peak phase using TSS to hours. And I'll show you what I mean. So this rider has a maximum of 17 hours availability when they're close to their peak, but really they're averaging 10 to 12 hours per week in the build up for that. So for most riders, the average during a base phase would look around 50% of a weekly TSS. So let me just show you what that means. In this whole period here, this whole base period here, this, I make an assumption just when I'm estimating that this weekly number here, this 400, I've just written over it, this 400 means 8 hours of training. So if you just go up here, 450 is approximately 9 hours, here the 600 approximately 12 hours. So that's kind of how I work, and then I just generally build that over time. Now, of course, this is the plan, and this is the plan that I have a problem with, is some weeks you feel better, some weeks you feel worse, some rides you feel better, some rides you feel worse. So actually planning this out and then sticking to it, you might be missing out on gains, or you might be doing some damage. So that's where the adjustment needs to come from month to month, week to week, and even day to day. But this isn't an exact science due to the variability of each ride, but you can get a pretty good idea by reviewing your training at different times of the year to see kind of how accurate this is. And after this, I double check the ramp rates to effectively manage peak and avoid increasing load too rapidly. So you can see here, these are the recommendations I have. And again, this isn't an exact science. So we can see what this sort of shakes out to out here. You have 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 3, 3. 3 is the maximum here, 3 down here. This is a rider that isn't brand new, has been around 3 or 4 years. So this would be fairly safe. And I would start here. I would see what happens after the first few weeks, how this is manageable. And then maybe I would increase it the following week or maybe 4 weeks to get a feel for if it's possible. All the time still managing this process. So when we get down to the peak down here, we don't run out of room. So we're always moving, always evolving this number. So the fitness can go up, 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 and up. Finally, this is where it comes all together, how we use the strategy to make ongoing decisions. And you can see the framework I use to base all of my decisions on. And using these parameters, focus, key metric, testing, and transition, ensures that the athlete and I always know what we're aiming to improve, how we measure improvements, what we test to find the improvements, and what that tells us when we're ready to move on to the next phase of training. So working out what these are for you is going to be your best place to start for me, because it changes for every athlete. So that's how you put the whole thing together. And the question is now, should you make one? And if so, how? Let me ask you this. Even if you've been cycling for a while, you wouldn't just jump on a bike and attempt the Tour de France, right? So the same applies when you're creating an annual training strategy. It has to map out your journey in cycling. It doesn't need to be complex, or you don't need to use training peaks. A spreadsheet will do, even a piece of paper will do, but just start using the main parts of the progress roadmap. Pick a goal, work backwards, and break your training into segments. Keep it simple and manageable, ensuring you're constantly putting in the work without overwhelming yourself as you progress over time. Then you can start layering in more complexity. But remember, this complexity has to be clear and serve a purpose. Knowing what improvements and when to transition have been the key for me and my athletes, and this should be the key for you as well. But really, the best hack in this strategy is learning how you respond to training. I spent a lot of time working on this for athletes I coach, but if you can do it for yourself, you will supercharge your performance, also ensuring you're ready for the unexpected challenges that will come your way. But the thing is, I've only really glossed over the basics. And if you're looking at different types of training sessions within, say, the build phase, watch this next video where I reveal the best scientifically validated interval training for more short duration power.